9 strikes since September, 2 in the Eastern Pacific this week, at least 37 dead. That's not a headline, it's a campaign tempo. The Pentagon and allied outlets say these vessels belonged to designated terrorist organizations, running narcotics through known routes in international waters. In the next minutes, I'll unpack the classified legal logic that redefined these boats as enemy combatants, and why officials say the campaign will continue. If a legal opinion can move targets from courtrooms to kill lists, what's next for the Pacific routes? A single classified memo turned smugglers on fast boats into combatants in a battle space. How did one document do that? It starts with a legal opinion that officials now cite when they greenlight lethal force on the high seas. Not court filings, not extradition packages. A memo that treats certain narcotics runs, when tied to designated terrorist groups, as part of an armed conflict rather than a crime wave. That shift unlocks a different toolbox, one built for war, not courtroom exhibits. Here's the clash. Criminal law says board the vessel, collect evidence, arrest the crew, and try them under statutes that govern drugs and conspiracy. The memo routes around that by treating specific traffickers as belligerents. No indictment first. No judge reviewing probable cause. The standard becomes targetability, not arrestability, and the venue is open ocean. The pivot rests on 2 levers. First, designations. When a drug trafficking network is linked to a group on terrorism lists, members or direct facilitators can be slotted into an enemy category. Second, national self-defense. If those networks fund or enable threats to U.S. forces or partners, officials claim a right to use force beyond known battlefields. That's how a fishing hull with hidden fuel bladders and bales can move from contraband case to wartime target profile. Watch the timeline. For years, the center of gravity was boarding actions in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific with cutters and Coast Guard law teams, building cases and towing go-fasts to ports. After the opinion, you see lethal strikes at sea cited as lawful in international waters, no boarding required, with rules of engagement written for combat identification instead of evidentiary chain of custody. This brings up status-based versus conduct-based targeting. Conduct-based looks at what a person is doing in the moment, hostile acts, direct participation. Status-based focuses on who they are within an organization. If a boat's crew are tagged as members of a designated network, status can trigger lethal authority even if they're not firing weapons. That matters for due process, because the proof sits inside classified files, not in open court. Jurisdiction is the next layer. On the high seas, flag state consent usually governs boardings and seizures. Maritime law enforcement playbooks rely on treaties, consent cables, and case packages. The opinion threads around that by framing these boats as enemy actors, not just suspect vessels. That makes the question less about consent to board, and more about whether the law of armed conflict applies in waters with no sovereign. So who signs off, and what is enough? Inside the chain, operators would need intelligence that ties the hull, the crew, and the cargo to a designated network, pattern of life, signals traffic, prior interdictions, financial links. The threshold becomes confidence in affiliation and mission, not just the presence of narcotics. Senior lawyers and commanders review the file, decide that necessity and proportionality are met, and clear the strike window. That's the core mechanism. By linking drug networks to designated terrorist groups, the opinion reframes smugglers as enemy belligerents and opens the door to lethal force without warrants. If that door is open, the next question is how the campaign moves through it, how fast it hits, where it pushes, and what results officials now claim at sea. 2 boats hit in the Eastern Pacific in 1 week. Why open a second front away from the Caribbean lanes? The answer starts with tempo. Since September, 9 lethal strikes have been carried out against alleged drug smuggling vessels, with at least 37 people reported dead. Officials stress the same 2 points after each hit. The actions took place in international waters, and no U.S. forces were harmed. The shift west is not a sidestep. It is a pattern that suggests the campaign aims to cut through more than one maritime artery at once. That pace carries risk. Operators are engaging high-speed, low-profile boats that ride low in the water, often without lights, moving along routes mapped for years by law enforcement and intelligence teams. The gamble is clear. These boats can look alike at a distance, and crews can swap flags or IDs in hours. Misidentifying a hull on the open ocean is not a spreadsheet error. It is a lethal mistake with diplomatic fallout. Every strike accepts that risk and tries to shrink it with a tighter kill chain. So, what gets targeted? The profiles align around boats allegedly run by networks linked to terrorist designations, hauling narcotics, and moving through known corridors that feed into larger logistics chains. They may run fuel bladders, bales sealed in plastic, and satellite messengers to coordinate handoffs. They avoid busy lanes, hug currents, and sprint at night. The routes are not secrets, they are habits, and habits make patterns. Maritime intelligence turns those patterns into decisions. Analysts pull pattern-of-life data from repeated trips along the same tracks. Signals intercepts can cue a launch window or confirm a link to a network node. ISR platforms, airborne and space-based, build a picture of the boat, the crew count, and the cargo signature. Validation likely stacks multiple sources: a prior interdiction tag on a facilitator, a handset hitting a known contact list, fuel loads that outmatch a fishing trip. Only when the confidence crosses a line does the green light move downrange. How the strike land stays discreet, but the outlines are standard. Air or naval assets can deliver standoff munitions to avoid close contact. Crews work with rules meant to prevent collateral harm: positive identification, isolation from nearby traffic, and timing that keeps the blast zone clear. On open water, that means patience and geometry more than brute force. The Eastern Pacific is not the Caribbean. Westward lanes feed longer hauls from production zones to deep water transfers, with logistics hubs spread along remote coasts. Hitting there disrupts different nodes, fuel suppliers, mid-ocean handoffs, and crews trained for multi-day runs. It also forces cartels to reroute assets across larger distances, raising cost and delay. Here's a snapshot. A go-fast breaks off a known corridor at dusk, running 40 knots, 3 heat signatures aboard. ISR flags the hull from a prior run connected to a DTO facilitator. Signals traffic pings a handset tied to a logistics broker. The decision window is minutes. The strike team gets clearance, angles in, and ends the run at sea. The expansion west signals a design to hit multiple choke points at once. With reach proven, the next fight is over standards: who counts as targetable, who decides, and what follows the blast. When courtroom standards are replaced by kill chain thresholds, what guardrails stop a legal theory from becoming a global manhunt at sea? The memo at the center of this campaign lets the executive branch treat suspected traffickers tied to terrorist designations as lawful targets. The thresholds sit inside classified annexes. Operators meet confidence levels on affiliation and mission, not probable cause for a warrant. Once the standard is met, commanders can authorize lethal force in international waters under executive authority, with reviews running through agency lawyers rather than a judge. That is where the friction starts. Civil liberties lean on transparency and contestability. Counter-terror logic leans on speed and prevention. Without judicial review, mistakes do not surface in a courtroom. They surface when a hull is gone and a crew is missing. Mixed cargo runs raise another risk. A boat may carry narcotics and day laborers hired for pay, not ideology. If the targeting file tags the platform as enemy run, non-combatant crew can sit inside a lethal envelope without ever knowing the case built around them. Oversight exists, but it thins out at sea. Congress can receive notifications, but the details arrive behind classified doors. Intelligence audits can scrub whether sources and methods met internal rules, yet they do not restore an opportunity to contest facts before force is used. Internal legal reviews confirm that necessity and proportionality boxes are checked, but those judgments are made by the same branch executing the mission, often on compressed timelines with limited external input. International law adds another layer of strain. High seas freedoms allow navigation without interference, and sovereignty concerns rise when kinetic actions take place off another state's approaches. Partner nations around the Pacific may see unilateral strikes as a reach, even if the U.S. frames them as counterterrorism. Some partners will ask for shared evidence before lending ports or airspace. Others will worry about precedents. If one state can strike suspects at sea, what stops rivals from citing their own memos and doing the same? There is precedent in targeted killings of non-state actors, where debates hinge on imminence, necessity, and proportionality. Applying that model to suspected narcotics crews stretches those tests. Imminence shifts from a bomb about to detonate to a shipment funding a threat down the line. Necessity weighs interdiction options that do not require a missile. Proportionality tries to map the harm of a strike against the flow of cash and influence it aims to cut. Expect adaptation. Cartels can deploy decoys, borrow flags, or stack boats with unwitting crews to complicate identification. Violence can move to shore bases or escort boats that threaten patrol aircraft. On the other side of the ledger, officials claim disrupted loads, attrition among skilled crews, and a deterrent effect against deploying drug subs and go-fasts along known corridors. The price of speed is ambiguity. Effective hits can sit next to wider error margins and fresh diplomatic risk. With the stakes clear, the question turns strategic. Does this remain a narrow tool or harden into standing doctrine for the Pacific routes? The classified memo has been unsealed, at least for us. Now the conversation starts. Like this video if you think this legal pivot needs more sunlight. Subscribe to track the campaign's next move as it unfolds in the Pacific. And here's the most important part. Comment below. Do you see this as a necessary targeted strike on terrorism funding or a dangerous precedent for war at sea? Let us know where you draw the line.